The impossible struggle. Why did God wrestle and lose to a man? Imagine a scene. On a dark, lonely night, a man haunted by the ghosts of his past finds himself alone. Suddenly, a mysterious figure emerges from the shadows and the fight begins. It's not a common assault. It's a brutal, physical confrontation that lasts all night. But what is shocking and defies all logic is the ending. The man, a common mortal, wins, and his opponent, well, it was God himself. How is this possible? God, the Almighty, the creator of the universe, defeated by a human being. This is one of the deepest enigmas in Scripture and is the reason why this story is not just a biblical passage, but a direct echo of what happens in our own lives. Before we delve into the why, let's go back to that moment. The man's name is Jacob, and he's in a panic. After years of running, he's about to be reunited with the brother he betrayed, Esau, who is now approaching with 400 armed men. Jacob's fear is so great that he divides his family, sends expensive gifts, and tries everything to appease his brother's anger. He is preparing for an external battle, but the real and most important war is happening inside him. Genesis 32 tells us that Jacob sends everyone to the other side of the river and stays alone. And it is at this moment that the biblical text makes the most intriguing statement. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. At first glance, it might seem like a thief, an enemy of his brother, maybe even an angel. But as the struggle intensifies and dawn approaches, the realization sinks in. The text intentionally leaves this ambiguity to make us question, but Jacob's final revelation leaves no doubt. He is wrestling with God himself, a visible divine manifestation, a theophany. But, and here comes the big why that holds our attention, why did God manifest as an MMA fighter instead of a brilliant angel, a thunder, or a burning bush? Why is this choice so specific? Because God reveals himself in a way that makes sense for each person. And for Jacob, his whole life was a struggle. He wrestled with his brother from the womb. He wrestled for the birthright. He wrestled for his father's blessing. He wrestled with his father-in-law, Laban. Jacob was the master of trickery, of schemes, of I'll figure it out. He always wanted to win by force. So for him to finally understand that the game was not like that, God came in the only format Jacob could understand, an opponent. This was not a physical fight to see who was stronger. It was a spiritual struggle to reveal who Jacob was. The external fight was a mirror of his internal war. And what happens next is the most shocking turning point. The text says, "And when he saw that he did not prevail against him." If you got a nagging feeling, you're right. How could God, the creator of the universe, not prevail against a man? The answer is simple and transformative. God didn't want to win. God doesn't want to crush our strength. He wants to transform it. He voluntarily diminished himself so that Jacob could have a chance. The goal was not victory in the fight, but the relationship after it. To prove his omnipotence, God did something that proved his power in a totally unexpected way. After hours of struggle, he simply touches Jacob's thigh and his hip joint is dislocated. A single touch was enough to wound and incapacitate the man. The lesson is clear. God could have won at any moment, but he chose not to. The question that haunts us then is, why did God wound Jacob? Why cause pain? This was not an act of cruelty, it was an act of mercy. Jacob spent his whole life trusting in his own strength, in his cunning, in his legs to run. Now, limping, unable to flee, unable to fight. The only thing he could do was cling to God. The pain, the limp, was the only medicine that cured his self-sufficiency. God wounded Jacob to save him. It was a surgical strike, a wound that sets free, that breaks from the outside to heal from the inside. God took the fight to the end because he was committed to transforming that man. And this holds true for us today. Sometimes God touches our health, our plans, our finances, our relationships, not out of anger, but to weaken us enough so that we stop fighting against him and finally understand that we depend on him. What seems like a tragedy is often a disguised new beginning. And it is at this point, at rock bottom, that the story completely turns. Even wounded, Jacob doesn't let go of God. He clings with everything he has left and declares, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." This is the most dramatic change in Jacob's story. The man who always obtained victories by force now realizes that true victory can only be received, not stolen. And then God asks the question that changes everything. What is your name? God, who knows all things, already knew his name. The question was not for information, it was for confrontation. Jacob had to face the truth about himself. In biblical culture, a name is an identity. Jacob meant deceiver, supplanter. And when he admits aloud, "I am the deceiver," that confession makes room for redemption. That old Jacob, the trickster, dies there. God then renames him. Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have wrestled with God and with men and have overcome. And here is the climax of our mystery. What does it mean to overcome God? Jacob did not defeat God by force. He won through perseverance in defeat. He prevailed not by defeating God, but by not giving up on God, even when the pain set in. It was a less physical and much more spiritual struggle, a war between pride and surrender. And when Jacob stopped fighting against the world and clung to God, the true victory came. To overcome God is, in fact, to lose everything that is false in us, to gain everything that is true in him. It is to be wounded in pride, but healed in identity. Jacob's defeat was his greatest victory, because it was there that he stopped pretending, stopped manipulating, and finally learned to trust. What if I told you that you can have a new identity, a new story starting today? That you don't have to fight your past and your insecurities alone? The story of Jacob shows us that the greatest victory is not in winning the fight, but in clinging to what can transform you. Stay in peace, and until next time.